So, Jules, it's a big day for you. PSG born and bred, or Paris born and bred, and it's the big final. It's the first one you can go to. So, were you there in 2020 when it was the COVID
No,
year?
no, yeah, no.
So this is obviously a big deal. PSG in the final. I mean, I've seen quite a lot of PSG this season. I was at the City game in January when, after 50 minutes, it looked all over, didn't it? It looked like PSG were going out, and then the best fight back ever for PSG, and then in the final. So was that for you the turning point of what happened this season?
Yeah, I would think so. I saw Vitinha the other day at the media there, and he said the same. He said if you had to pick maybe one moment where the players felt it clicked and something changed, it's probably that second half of that City game. Really, do you remember under the pouring rain? It'd been raining all day in Paris, and it looked so doomed after the second goal for Man City. Not that PSG were not playing well in that game, but it just felt okay. This is not going to be their day. And then that Barcola move on the left, the nutmeg on Nunes, and then the cross and the Dembele goal, and then after that it was just not stopping them. And I think they realized then, with that, the intensity that they have, the energy, and some of the best players one-on-one, and that can just make something happen anytime, on top of that, their cohesion collectively, that they could do anything. They could beat anybody. It could be their time at any time, and that really changed everything. After that, they won away at Stuttgart, and then it was the playoffs, and then the knockout stages, where they never looked back, really. And I think it was coming. They were building something, and Luis Enrique was taking the time to work on different aspects of their game, with the ball, without the ball, how you build up, your finishing, all that kind of stuff. And then finally that day, it seems like it all got together.
I mean, I remember Dembele scoring against City, and that seemed to spark Dembele into life this season, because you had the next game in Stuttgart, he scored a hat trick. I was in Stuttgart. It was that game where it could have been, Stuttgart could go out, PSG could go out, and PSG absolutely hammered them. And Dembele was amazing. And that night I thought, PSG could win this if they get a decent draw. And they did. They got Brest. But then it was a pretty hard draw after that in terms of beating all the Premier League teams. But it's just they've got the pace and the power in it. I was watching it thinking, this is so different to the PSG that I saw 2 years ago, maybe, when you had... I remember, it may have been 2-3 years ago, they were at the Etihad, and it was... I remember seeing it, PSG were defending the corner, and you had Mbappe, Neymar, and Messi just stood on the halfway line with their hands on the hips, as if to say, oh, what's that to do with those guys? That's been the change, hasn't it? They've become a team now rather than a team of individuals.
Yeah, and I think that's what Luis Enrique wanted from the get-go. It's hard. It's always the same. It's hard because you know that Messi at his best, or Neymar or Mbappe at their best, can win you any game at any time, really, because that's how good they are on their own. The thing is, what do you do the rest of the time when they are not your match winner just like that? Because you still need your collective to be good enough. And we've said many times, together, that team with Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe up front was great on paper, maybe the greatest front three that's ever put together, but it was very much 8 and 3. You had your goalkeeper, then 7 outfield players, and then them 3 up front, not caring when they didn't have the ball, not caring when they lost the ball, not trying to get the ball back, things like that. And it just doesn't work. You can win the league in France, of course, because they are still so good. But in the Champions League, when you play against top teams, you get found out. You just can't defend with 8 players or 7 outfield players, and you can't attack with 7 but 3 more, where you give them the ball and then just let them do something special. So it was never going to work. And I think there's one stat that sums it all up really well, is that over the last 6 years now, it was 4 semi-finals of the Champions League, 2 finals now, and 4 semi-finals. And the only 2 seasons where they didn't get to the semi-finals were the 2 seasons with Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe up front, where they lost in the knockout stages in the last 16 straight away, because collectively they were just not good enough. So Luis Enrique wanted to change that. And he felt like, because you could not do that with Neymar or Verratti, for example, they had to go. And even with Mbappe, there was, do we keep him? Do we not keep him? In the end, he didn't want to stay. But even last season when he was there, trying to accommodate him in what Luis Enrique was trying to do was very difficult, because he didn't want to defend.
So we've both written a piece for the final, talking about PSG, how they've evolved from the Messi, Neymar, Mbappe situation to now. And I was speaking to a sporting director contact of mine, and he was saying that he had a discussion with PSG about 2 years ago when they started off on this route, and it wasn't just done for football reasons, this idea to get away from the superstar thing. That they said that they felt they weren't connecting properly to Paris and to their ultras, which I thought was really interesting, that they wanted to build a team that their fans would identify with. Because we all remember the day when Messi was booed at a game, but now you really sense a connection between the fans on the terraces now. And I've got to say, and you're biased, Jules, but I'll say this: the PSG fans are the best in Europe. They've been amazing this season. They have been they've won the Champions League already for me for their backing of the team away from home and all that, amazing. But if they come up with the idea to build it so they can have a connection with the fans and the players, they've done it.
Yeah, and I think, I know PSG is a young club in its current form now. It was a merger 750 years ago and that kind of stuff. I know that, but those fans they're proper football fans, and as great as it is, if your club signs Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe, like really, as a fan, you want to see that. But that was special for fans outside of Paris, really, because I think the real fans, the fans who go to the Parc des Princes every day and then travel to Angers or Nantes or Montpellier or Lorient every weekend to go in the away end, they wanted to see a team. They wanted to see a team they could just not just like, but also relate to, and identify themselves to. And if you see a team on the pitch where the front three, as good as it could be individually and technically, and some of the greatest players ever, just don't defend, don't work hard for the team, don't look like they love the shirt that they're wearing and love the club and identify themselves to the club, as a neutral, you're going to feel disconnected from them. And that's not good. It's not good at all. And, PSG tried the marquee signings, the superstars, etc., Ibra, Neymar, blah, 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 Messi, everything we want, because they also wanted the club to get more popular and to get more revenues, which is fine. And at some point they realized also this is not working. And more importantly, Mark, to your point, it's not that it was not just working on the pitch, but off the pitch, some of that fan base, great fan base, was just being disconnected to it because they just didn't see themselves in them. And that has changed massively. You see this PSG team, and it's funny because you and I live in the UK, obviously, and for a long time, and when we used to go to game, there was a lot of English media, English journalists that we know, that we're friends with, who were saying like, "Oh, this is not a real team, your club," and taking the mickey of me, which I can really understand. And now people come to me and say, "I love this team. This team is so likable. They play the right way. They have all that energy, that youth, they're fun. And that is the massive change as well. I don't know if they will win the Champions League final on Saturday or not, but they've already won a lot this season outside of the trophies by making people like them.
I'll give you an example. My boy, we live in Manchester, and he bought himself a PSG top with Doué's name on the back. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't want a Lindelof shirt, or you don't want a Luke Shaw shirt? But I mean, Doué's been amazing this season. Barcola and Bella. Who's the player that the PSG fans really identify and latch onto now? Is it Dembele? Is the terrace hero?
Yeah, a little bit, because he's clearly the leader of this team, because he scored a lot of goals, because he turned into prime Brazilian Ronaldo between January and March, something like that. And I think the truth is probably a little bit in between. He's never going to score 3 goals a game through the whole season. This is not what he does, and he's improved so much now that he's not going to miss another 3 or 4 sitters per game like he used to before. But I think it's probably him. But then Marquinhos has been there for 12 years. He arrived when he was 21 or 20. He grew with his team. He was there on the bad nights. He was there on the good nights. And Saturday could be the greatest nights of all, really. I think Vitinha and probably João Neves also encapsulates really what this team is about and what the fans like about them, because they are so unselfish and work so hard for the team and just do everything. They're good on the ball. They're good off the ball. They run and run and run. They're smart and they're young and they're very likable. And I think all of that counts. But it feels really that Doué, especially the way he's revealed himself almost to the whole world since December, has been incredible. And I think a lot of people, like my middle one's best friend, who's English, big Spurs fan, and just nothing links him to PSG apart from his friendship with my middle son. We bought a Doué shirt for him because he wanted it for his birthday. And so, like your son, I think Doué, because of the skills, because of the steps over, because of the way he looks and how spectacular he is, I think has gained a lot of fans in France, in Paris, but all around the world too.
Just talk about Luis Enrique a little bit, because I mean, this guy's already won a Champions League with Barcelona. He won the treble with Barcelona, but I always feel that with Luis Enrique, he kind of gets overshadowed by Pep Guardiola, because obviously what came before him at Barcelona. But you could kind of argue that his Barcelona team was better than Pep's. Messi, Suarez, Neymar, amazing team, and he's used that blueprint again at PSG. I'm watching PSG thinking this is like watching Barcelona in 2015. Does he get the credit he deserves?
No, you're right. I don't think so. I think, like Vitinha said to me the other day, he's an absolute genius. He said, "I promise you, when you work with him every day, I know he can come across as a bit austere and stubborn and a bit strict at times, which I think he is. He's a very strong personality. But I think he's a wonderful, wonderful manager, really. And you're right, I don't think people give him enough credit. 10 years ago was that trouble, and I think it's maybe because in between there hasn't been much happening for him. He went to other clubs with the national team, and things didn't really work out for him. But I think he's wonderful. The way he built this team is great. When we were at the media day at training, he obviously goes onto his crane, to watch the little 11v11 from the crane from the top. And a lot of people who didn't know this were a bit shocked and said to me, like, why is he on this crane? I said, no, this is what he does. He loves it. He asked the club to buy the crane, and he goes up, and then when he has something to say, he stops the game. The crane comes down slowly. He runs onto the pitch, says something to the players, then goes back. The crane goes up, and the game continues. And I saw him after the training. I said, like, just tell us why you love the crane so much. He said, if I could watch any games, like Champions League, Ligue 1 games, French Cup, whatever you want, from the crane, I would. It's just I can't do it in a game because I can't be in the stands, and then it take me too long to go back to the pitch, and I need to go back to the pitch quickly to give the instructions to the players. But he said, this is the way I see the best. It's just, I think he's different on many levels to other top managers in the world. And because he won that treble 10 years ago, I think he feels there might be a little bit of, destiny there, a bit of karma, and that is his turn again.
Synchronicity. I was speaking to somebody at Man United about how when they were looking for a new coach, it was probably early 2022. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had been sacked and Ralph Rangnick had come in for a temporary role. They basically had a shortlist, and it became the final two was Mauricio Pochettino, who was at PSG at the time, and Erik ten Hag. And I was told that they really wanted Luis Enrique, but he made it clear early 2022, I'm interested, but I'm not leaving until I've done the Spain job at the World Cup in December 2022. Yeah. It was too long to wait. So, I mean, it's sliding doors, isn't it? I can't imagine Luis Enrique going to Man United having the ability to be successful there as he is at PSG. Because at PSG, he's got the best team in the league. He's got all the resources he needs. He's able to. I mean, Man United probably even buy him a crane. Let's be honest. But PSG have got him a crane. He's training ground. So I think it's definitely Man United's lost his PSG gain. I do think that. I must admit, he can come across as quite severe, but he's quite funny as well. I was in the press conference also at the Farmers League. They've beaten 4 Premier League teams, Man City, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Arsenal, and he's like, well, we're a Farmers League. Well, really? They could be the best team in Europe by now.
Yeah, and I think he's got that, and the players love him, which I think he doesn't like the media. He doesn't like to talk, as you know, he talks a lot, like every top manager, because there's press conferences it seems every day almost, and he's not too keen on that. But with the players, it's a very different relationship. I think his man management skills are great. It could be tough. And I think there was a moment in November where there was a little bit of a tension between him and some of the leaders in that dressing room, because he felt at times too dogmatic, almost not giving enough freedom to some of the players that just needed the freedom. Somebody like Nuno Mendes, for example, who was very much a third centre-back when PSG had the ball, and a lot of the players are like, hang on, the guy is so good going forward. Why are you preventing him from doing that? But to be fair to Luis Enrique, he listened at that time, and he was like, you know what? I think you're right. Maybe I was just a little bit too dogmatic. It was too much my own way. And he let loose a little bit, not too much, because he's still very much in control of everything at the club right now. But he let loose a little bit, and the players appreciated that. And that also was part of maybe that little turnaround. So I think he's great with his players. I don't know if it's enough to win on Saturday, and we discussed it off air just now. I'm a bit stressed already. I just think Inter have got so much experience and they're so good. But like you said as well, this PSG team can adapt to a lot of things. And yet they're young. Yet not many of them have played Champions League final or a final full stop. But I think they've got that spirit, the mentality that I think can take them a very long way.
You just mentioned Nuno Mendes there. I think it's only fair that we mentioned Hakimi as well, who's been amazing at right back. And it's something that Trent Alexander-Arnold said earlier this season about he wants to go to Real Madrid to be the first right back to win the Ballon d'Or. I think Hakimi could do it this year. I think he's had such a great season for PSG that, if he has a good final, he has been the best right back in the world by far. I mean, he's been massive for PSG, hasn't he?
He's been incredible, and it's not just what he brings with the ball going forward. It's just his running and all that energy that he also brings. Like even in the French Cup final on Saturday, which PSG won easily, they were 3-0 up at halftime. In the 92nd minute, when Reims had one of the rare attacks that they had, he was the one sprinting 60 yards to go and get the ball back, and it's incredible. Really, defensively, it's still not Paolo Maldini, but he's one of those modern fullbacks, a bit like more than Trent, but a bit like Dumfries, a bit like an Alphonso Davies, for example, where it's the output with the ball that is more important than without the ball defensively. But still, he's worked a lot on that. He's been incredible. And to be fair, Nuno Mendes and Hakimi against Di Marco and Dumfries, although they play as wing backs, are the two best pairs of fullbacks / wing backs you can find. So even then, that final between the four of them, when whoever gets on top, will be great.
Right, so Jules, I know you like your stats, but you don't like this one because you told me off air you're not sure about this one. So I'll run it past for everybody else. 1979, Munich hosted the final, Nottingham Forest won it. 1993, Munich hosted the final, Marseille won it. 1997, Munich hosted the final, Borussia Dortmund won it. 2012, Munich hosted the final, Chelsea won it. All those 4 teams got one thing in common. It was their first ever Champions League title. Now, Inter Milan have won, I think, 3. PSG haven't won a Champions League title yet. So the Munich, the lucky omen of Munich, is that going to last for PSG, or are you still worried about Inter Milan just having too much experience?
I hope so much. And also, some of those teams that you mentioned was their second final. So the first final they lost, Marseille, Chelsea, and for PSG they lost the one 5 years ago against Bayern. So maybe there's something. I mean, Marseille won in Munich, as you said, the Champions League in 1993 in a different stadium because
against the team from Milan.
Against the team from Milan, the other one. So there's a lot of little things that I'm hanging on to make me a little bit more confident. I think it's a hard final to call. I really believe that all that experience that Inter have, including the final 2 years ago against City, where they were maybe the better team and were a bit unlucky not to win, I think will count. It's also a team that can suck out almost all the energy that you want to put, slow down the tempo, control that tempo the way they want. And as we saw against Barcelona in the semi-final, be super efficient. They scored 7 goals out of 9 shots on target. This is unprecedented at that level. So I fear this Inter team, really. But I look at my PSG team and I see all those players probably playing their best football, which is not the case for Inter Milan. I think some of those players were better 2 years ago, for example. But for this PSG team, everybody is at their best. They've never played better than that, individually and collectively. They've got match winners, as we said. Yes, they lack maybe a bit of experience. Yeah, like a Pacho can make a mistake. Same with Nuno Mendes. Same with João Neves, probably. But they have so much energy, so much desire, so much hunger that I think they're also ready to do it. So I could see, my worst scenario, PSG playing really well, not taking their chances that well, Inter scoring on a set piece and winning 1-0, and that's it. And then I cry my eyes out.
Yeah, just suck the romance out of the game, that wouldn't. I mean, obviously PSG are amazing to watch, and the big, bad, ugly football team wins the game. But I don't know.
Exactly.
It's such a hard game to call, but it's a great final because it's so tight and nobody can call it. I think there's no kind of outstanding favourites, so it's going to be a great occasion. And you'll smile anyway, Jules. You're always smiling. So
always. Sure, but I can't wait to see you there because sharing that with you as your PSG fan. I know you are. I know you don't really want to tell me, but I know you are now because you've seen us so many times, and you're aware a lucky guy because every time you go to a PSG game, we win. So I hope you bring the same luck on Saturday.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're going to take a break, and I think afterwards we're going to talk about Chelsea versus Real Betis in the Conference League final. But that's it for now. Let's see what happens in Munich on Saturday. It is the end of the season, or the Premier League season anyway. We've still got European games to do. We've got the Conference League final this week. We've got the Champions League final. We've got the Nations League. We've got the Club World Cup. And I've got James Olley with me because Rob has taken a week off at the end of a mad season. So you must be looking forward to the end of the season, James.
I can't even see the end of the season. There's still about 6 weeks left. I don't know where Rob's gone. Rob's going to America with me to the Club World Cup. He's being lazy. This is ridiculous. The season doesn't end. Football never ends. It officially goes on forever.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Man City players talk at the end of their season with a haunted look on their face, knowing that their season might not end until the middle of July in the US. So, but yeah, it's been a long slog, as you say, from the Euros last summer right through to where we are now. But we've got a final this week, a big final for a Premier League club. It's Chelsea in the Conference League final. I know you're going to Wroclaw on Wednesday, James. So obviously Chelsea have made it into the Champions League, finished 4th in the Premier League. Big success for Enzo Maresca. So in many ways, this Conference League final feels like it doesn't really matter now, but does it matter?
Well, I mean, it matters from the point of view that Chelsea are a club that under Roman Abramovich was used to winning trophies. The managers would come and go, the players would come and go, but one thing stayed consistent, and that is that they would win almost every year. They ended with a trophy. So And this would be the first trophy of the Bowley Clear Lake era, and it would be a significant milestone for them in that regard to bring what would be calm to the chaos, really. And I think I think the Champions League qualification is a huge thing for Maresca, actually, because the club sort of privately circulated, and we ran a source's story on this, that Maresca would stay in post no matter what happened in terms of Champions League qualification. We ran that earlier this month, and they were trying to get out ahead of any potential sort of ramifications of missing out and finishing the Premier League season badly. But it's all sort of well and good to kind of get that out there. But had they missed out on the Champions League and then they'd lost this final on Wednesday, there would have been serious questions asked about Maresca, and among a fan base that is already pretty disgruntled. But getting that top 5 finish has really sort of made it a much smoother week this week, and really they can just go and attack this final. And if they win it, great. If they don't, it's disappointing, but it's hardly the end of the world.
I mean, I think we've both been of the opinion that Tottenham won a trophy last week, and a trophy's a trophy. It's important to win a trophy. We've both said that, and I think we've both said that Arsenal need to win a trophy, so we can't be dismissive of a tournament. It is a European trophy, and they don't come along very often. And I think Chelsea got this. Well, it'd be the unique distinction of being the only club to win every single trophy they could play for. I think they're the only club that will able to do that. I don't think they want to be in the Conference League again, but if they win the Conference League, they'll have had a clean sweep of all the trophies. So that's something they can be proud of, I guess, if they do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot was made of that when they won the Club World Cup, actually, because that was just before the whole Roman Abramovich ownership ended, or the club went into government ownership. They'd won the lot, and then obviously UEFA created this UEFA Conference League, and suddenly they've got one more hurdle to jump. But I mean, this competition really has felt a bit sort of lose-lose, really, for Chelsea all the way through, in that they're quite obviously been the best team, that's the strongest team in the competition with the best European pedigree, the biggest resources by far. They've been playing, with all respect to a lot of these teams, they've been really playing European minnows all the way through. Now they've got a proper team in the final in Betis. But the sort of expectation is still that they win it. So even if they win it, I don't think it's going to be, a huge sort of fanfare. But I just think it's really important for Maresca, because, he has faced a lot of criticism this season, and it did feel as though, a bit like in the title winning team with Leicester in the Championship that he guided back to the Premier League, there was a really big wobble midway through that season. Leicester came out the other side of it, and Chelsea have sort of done the same, really. I mean, it's been pretty unconvincing. They weren't great at Forest. I was there at the City Ground at the weekend, and it was more functional than anything else. It was a bit old school Chelsea, really, and that they kind of sort of defensively they were very resilient. They dug in. They didn't really commit too much risk in the game, particularly after they went ahead, and they got themselves over the line. They found a way to win, and that sort of that ironclad spirit, that winning mentality has sort of been lost in the takeover and the sort of turmoil of the last 2 or 3 years. So if they can sort of get themselves over the line in the Champions League and deliver a trophy, it really gives Maresca a solid platform to go and attack Club World Cup, and then obviously the next season coming up.
Do we know what it's worth to win the Conference League? I mean, we know what it's worth to win the Champions League, and we know what it'll be worth to win the Club World Cup. Obviously, Chelsea are in that, so they'll do well out of that, and I don't think winning or losing the Conference League final will have a massive impact on their finances. But is it worth winning financially?
Well, I mean, it's negligible. I don't know the exact figure. I don't have it to hand. But, I mean, from that point of view, it's 97 million quid to win the Club World Cup. And I know that Chelsea are going to take that competition particularly seriously. We all know that they had to get quite creative with their PSR and FFP compliance. They sold a hotel, which I think is still actually being investigated by UEFA. They also sold their women's team. There's only so many sort of accounting loopholes you can jump through before you actually start to run out of road. And, any prize money on that score will be welcome. I think there might be one or two departures this summer. I don't think they're under pressure to sell. I mean, it was a big thing made last year, the June 30th deadline, that they had to get a few out of the door. Obviously, Conor Gallagher left, there were one or two others, and then they had the bomb squad right at the end of the summer when they were desperately trying to get players out. They'll look to get players like Raheem Sterling off the books, Carney Chukwuemeka, Ben Chilwell, Armando Broja, Trevor Chalobah. There's quite a few who've been out on loan who you think will be moved on. And if they can generate the money there, then that will ease compliance. But I mean, the prize money really is all about the Club World Cup in terms of that. I think it's a minimum 40 million they're going to get for that. And as I say, it could be 97 if they win it. So that would have a huge impact for Chelsea.
So do we expect any deals to be done before they go to the Club World Cup? Because obviously we know that the window opens on the 1st of June and they've been linked with Liam Delap. I mean, some clubs are trying to get players in before the Club World Cup. Is that something Chelsea will do you think?
Well, they're fairly relaxed about this. I was speaking to someone about this yesterday at Chelsea, actually, and there is a view that what this window is doing is actually rushing teams into doing their summer business as opposed to trying to do it diligently and properly like everyone else. So it is a sort of artificial window in the sense that, okay, there's an urgency for those clubs who are going to the Club World Cup, but for everybody else, there isn't that. A lot of them go on holiday. A lot of them don't necessarily want to do the business, day one when the window opens. They maybe would want to have a holiday for a couple of weeks, let the recruitment teams do their work, negotiate, and then obviously have those players in ideally for the start of pre-season. So it is possible, and we know that in the case of Delap, obviously, it would be a fairly straightforward deal to do in terms of there's a release clause. We know the fixed price. There's no negotiating there. It's a case of convincing the player to come. So that one is a possibility. And clearly they need more firepower. I mean, their number one target this summer is to bring in a forward. Maresca's defended Nicholas Jackson a lot this season. And I do think he gets a bit of an unfair press sometimes. I do think he's better than a lot of people think. However, is he going to win you the league? Probably not. And they certainly need more competition in that area.
So, as listeners and viewers will know, every week we can't avoid going down the Manchester United rabbit hole. It always seems to drag us in. And on this occasion, the Europa Conference League final, a Manchester United rabbit hole opens up. We've got Jadon Sancho on the Chelsea side. We've got Antony on the Real Betis side. Now, 2 players on loan from Man United with uncertain futures. 1, 2, or neither may end up going back to Old Trafford. But it's just interesting that I've got a list of 11 players who've left United in recent years who've gone on to good things, certainly this season. And these are 2 that, Sancho hasn't had the greatest time at Chelsea, but he could end the season winning a trophy. Antony's had a great time at Betis. I mean, it's a strange scenario whereby there's so many players. Scott McTominay's got 12 goals in 34 games in Serie A, helped Napoli win the Serie A title. Romelu Lukaku's had a great season there. Dean Henderson helped Crystal Palace win the FA Cup. I mean, there's a long list of even Tyrell Malacia has won the Dutch League with PSV Eindhoven this season. So, obviously, Sancho is a different scenario to some, but what do you see happening with Sancho? Do you think, has he actually benefited from being away from United? Has he done better at Chelsea than we've actually given him credit for?
Well, it's funny, that list of players that you mentioned, who've done better, I'm not sure whether Sancho joins that list.
Mm-hmm.
He's been intermittent.
He's in the Rashford camp, isn't he? He's in the Marcus Rashford camp. He's kind of done okay, but not pulled up any trees.
Yeah, 3 goals, 4 assists in 31 games. It's not exactly tearing up trees. I think it's sort of significant that, when they negotiated the deal, Chelsea to sign him, that obviously we all knew straight away about the obligation to buy, the fixed fee around 25 million. But it only came out a couple of months ago that, actually, they've also got a penalty fee release that they don't have to pay that. And they just pay 5 million to send him back to Old Trafford. I think that the fact that came out when it came out, I think probably tells you that there are certain doubts about Sancho. I mean, I was told at the time that was a data-led move, that, Chelsea obviously have pursued this policy of looking at young players across Europe and trying to sign players they identify as having great potential and giving them long contracts and that stability to then develop at Stamford Bridge. They felt Sancho fell into that category. I'm not sure the data would still suggest that, although they obviously have a lot more metrics than we do to analyse these players. So I think that one is a 50-50 call, really. I think it might also depend on what else they can do in the market. I think if they can identify a player like Nico Williams at Athletic Bilbao, who's obviously attracting a lot of interest from Arsenal and 1 or 2 other clubs, Real Madrid potentially as well. If they can get him, then I think they'd probably send Sancho back. But if it looks as though they're not going to be able to get other targets, then they may just stick with Sancho and back themselves to basically improve a young player.
I mean, from the Betis point of view, I mean, Antony has got 9 goals in 25 games for Betis, and he's got 5 assists. He's had a fantastic time on loan there. They've got Isco as well, who's obviously a player that's had a great career at Real Madrid, has won plenty of titles. Manuel Pellegrini is a coach that we're both familiar with. He's won a Premier League title with Man City, had a time at West Ham. So is this the toughest game that Chelsea could have had in the Conference League, considering, like you said earlier, that it's been a tournament of minnows?
It will be a significant step up for Chelsea from anything that they've really faced so far. And, you could argue that you probably want your toughest game in the final because the motivation will be there anyway. The players will obviously be targeted. Everything will be peaking towards that. But, I just think the Champions League qualification has taken the edge off it, because there's been such pressure on Chelsea to just expected to win this competition all the way through now. And if they'd fallen short and they were out of the Champions League, then, it would be a failure. The season would be a failure. Whereas now it really is a success, I think, no matter what happens on Wednesday night. And they can attack it with a slightly different mentality. But, Antony's have you seen much of Antony out there? I mean, is he still doing that ridiculous sort of turn on the ball that, is not really a skill, but he thinks is a skill?
I saw a bit of the second leg against Fiorentina, and he did play well in parts, but he was the Antony of Manchester United in parts as well. He's very unpredictable, but not in a good way. But I think he's found a bit of a home in Spain. He's found that the league is not as physical. And I think that's one thing that a lot of players who struggle, not just at United, but in the Premier League, they can find a home in Germany or in Spain where it's less physically demanding on them. There's not as many games to worry about. And I think Antony's thrived. I think the big issue from United's perspective is that I think in terms of amortisation, they're still looking to get around £30 million transfer fee to kind of cancel what they owe on the books. And as well as he's done at Betis, I don't see anybody paying £30 million for Antony. I don't think Betis can afford it. The hope from United's perspective is that because he's done so well at Betis, he might attract one of the biggest Spanish clubs to maybe make a move for him and potentially come close to that £30 million area. His wages aren't too big. I've been told he's only on around a £70,000 a week basic at United, so that isn't going to be too punishing for a club to sign him. But look, the good thing is that at least United have found a club that he's thrived at, and it means that they can actually look to bring some money for him. Sancho is different. I agree. I think Sancho's been average at best.
mean, you mentioned that. Obviously, there's a list of players there that have improved or have certainly increased their performance level since they've left Old Trafford. If I ask you the $1 million question, do you have an answer to it? Which is, what is going on? Why is it that we've talked an awful lot about Manchester United and the issues there, but why is it that individual players who had kind of plateaued, and I'm thinking of Scott McTominay probably most obviously, at Old Trafford, have suddenly been reinvigorated and found new dimensions to their game when they leave? What is it about Old Trafford that seems to do this to players?
Well, there's two more names I'm going to add to that list. Anthony Elanga helped Forest qualify for Europe this season, 6 goals and 11 assists. That's a great return, because if you compare his output to the Man United players this season, Mason Greenwood, difficult circumstances obviously with United, but 21 goals in 34 Ligue 1 games for Marseille helped them qualify for the Champions League. He's a top scorer in Ligue 1. Now, what happens? I think there's an air of defeatism at United, I think. And I think it's a crushing pressure that's on so many players. And I think the younger players that have struggled at United, I think Alejandro Garnacho is potentially the next one that this will happen to. He'll leave United and thrive somewhere else because United don't have the dressing room of experienced players that are there to bring them on. Rasmus Højlund maybe another one. I think, in the past they've had players, let's look at Cristiano Ronaldo and Wayne Rooney. I think Rooney was maybe an exception, but Ronaldo, when he started at United, he was inconsistent to the point of being Garnacho inconsistent. But look at the players he had around him. Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Ruud van Nistelrooy, players that would take that pressure off. When I look at Garnacho and Højlund, they've been thrown at the deep end and they've struggled to survive, but there's nowhere there to help them. And I think that's why it's so difficult for them at United. And when they leave United, it's a release. McTominay's gone to Napoli and he's in a dressing room with players that most of them have already won Serie A with Napoli about 2 or 3 years ago. They're a top team. They've got a top coach in Antonio Conte. I just think there's too much asked of the young players at United, or even the more experienced players. And I think you saw that you were in Bilbao last week, and you'll have heard the Luke Shaw comments and the Diogo Dalot comments apologising again for the performances and being very downbeat. And I think even Luke Shaw said that some of the players, you don't believe that some of the other players are up to it. Well, I think I'm sick of hearing Luke Shaw say that. I'm sure the fans are as well. That to me comes across as the defeatist mentality in the dressing room. Luke Shaw's been there for 11 years and he's still saying things that he was saying 4 or 5 years ago. If I was Man United, I'd look at those players thinking, well, if that's what you think, you better leave, because they want a better mentality around the place. And if you're a young player, you're hearing your experienced players saying that some of these players aren't good enough, to find it hard to play for the club. That is the most defeative, negative attitude you can imagine. So that is a problem. You're a dressing full of whingers.
Those interviews are difficult, though. I would just in Luke Shaw's defence, I think when they do have to front up after they lose, and when they're losing whatever it was, 17 league games, and they've obviously lost a major final, there's only sort of so many things you can say. I mean, I'd add to that list.
I don't think Luke Shaw has this status to say it, because Luke Shaw has barely played this season. So if that was Bruno Fernandes saying it, fair enough. But Luke Shaw's been sat on the touchlines for 9 months of the year because he's not been fit. So I don't think Luke Shaw has the credibility to say those things.
The other one I'd add into this list is potentially is Kobbie Mainoo. When you talk about players who might thrive when they go somewhere else, I'm just thinking about how good Mainoo was for England last summer, when he's obviously got Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham, Harry Kane, all these players around him. These sort of things. All right, we can talk about whether it was too structured and it was too conservative and everything else, and Gareth Southgate's approach and all that. But that was a well-drilled team with experience, and suddenly you're looking at Mainoo thinking he could really thrive in this. My concern would be, from a Manchester United point of view, that he would be the biggest fear to lose, that he could go somewhere and really become a really world-class player. I think Kobbie Mainoo's got that in it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if Mainoo goes, and there's every chance he will, because without boring people again, PSR, homegrown player, pure profit, there is a financial reason to let Kobbie Mainoo go. I think you're right. I think he's a player that they would regret letting go. But I think on the flip side is, I don't think he fits Amorim's system. I just don't think he is the profile of player that Amorim wants in the middle of his pitch. He's not mobile enough. He needs, you could drop him into the Arsenal team quite, if Thomas Partey was to leave this summer, for instance, we know Jorginho's going. I think a midfield of Mainoo, Rice and Odegaard is a potential title in the midfield. But he's surrounded by players that will be able to make up for his shortcomings. At Man United, he isn't. He's surrounded by Casemiro, who, great player in the past, but he's no longer a great player. Manuel Ugarte, who, again, not very mobile, not very good passer. Kobbie Mainoo is having to do the job of 2 or 3 players in that Man United team when he can't even do his own properly because of the way that Amorim sets it up. So I can see him leaving because, like I say, he doesn't fit the profile, and it's an easy way out of financial problems. But yeah, put him in that Arsenal team. Put him in a Liverpool team, I think he'd thrive, and that is the danger that United face with people like Kobbie Mainoo. I'm not sure that applies to Rasmus Højlund and Garnacho, but he could do, because they're obviously talented players, but I just think the environment they're in is not. They're being let down by the lack of experienced players around them, and I think as well, maybe by the lack of experience on Ruben Amorim's coaching staff. It's a very young coaching staff. I don't think they've got the wisdom either that could look at Kobbie Mainoo and think, how can we get the best out of this player without trying to force him into a system that doesn't suit him.
I mean, Garnacho's an interesting one from a Chelsea point of view, because obviously he was linked with Chelsea in January, and interested in what you heard about this, because I had some sort of conflicting information at the Chelsea end that I'm not sure how interested they actually were in January. I think that was quite agent driven at the time. Now, whether because that changes in the summer because they decide to go for Garnacho over Sancho, for example, or whether they think actually we can do a cheaper deal now, or they've seen something in the last 4 or 5 months. I mean, I'm not sure. Given how Garnacho reacted to, Ruben Amorim getting him out of the Europa League final, and obviously how his brother reacted as well. I'm not sure that sends the greatest message to potential new clubs either, does it? That, this guy actually, as promising as he is on the pitch, could actually be an issue off the pitch. I mean, do you think, from what you've heard, do you think Chelsea could be a viable option?
I think like you, I think it seems less likely. To me, I was told that Napoli was the deal that United thought was going to happen in January. That was 90% done, and at the last minute it didn't happen. I think it was more about personal terms than fee, and it didn't go to Napoli. I think you probably regret that now. Garnacho, I think United will as well, because he's barely contributed in the second half of the season. I think with Garnacho, people forget, although he's an Argentine international, he was basically born and raised in Madrid. He spent his life in Spain. I think he would embrace a move to La Liga. I think it would suit him financially, whether the clubs could do it or not. But I think he, again, is one of these players that would maybe a loan move to Germany or Spain would help him. But I think United probably need the money. And I just don't see him going to a Premier League club. I think, like you said, I think there's too many issues with Garnacho in the sense that, is he consistent enough? Is he intelligent enough when he's got the ball at his feet? I just don't think he would fit in. I think the only reason he'd go to Chelsea is because, as you know, they would find a way to monetize it down the line. And they've got a lot of wingers who are in the same kind of inconsistent boat.
Well, does he want a 14-year contract? That's the big question.
He probably does, yeah. But yeah, it's. I It's an interesting situation with Garnacho, but I think also United haven't helped themselves by it's become clear that Ruben Amorim told him at the weekend he could leave. Well, that just damages United's asking price. All of a sudden everyone knows that he's available, and United maybe wanted, £50 million, and clubs know that they're desperate to get rid of him, and it might end up being £35-40 million to get. So more kind of naivety from the United end that this has been allowed to come out. But I think Garnacho will move on. I think that's pretty safe to assume, and he may go before the end of the June window.